I just want to say that I have never seen the Republican Party so unified as it is right now.
Welcome back to America Decides. Well, Donald Trump says the GOP is unified, but do the results in South Carolina bear that out? And how worried should his campaign be about it? Not only did Nikki Haley win nearly 40% of the vote in the Palmetto State, but 31% of Republican voters there say they would be, quote, dissatisfied if Trump wins the nomination. Ashley Etienne and Emily Benavides join us now. Ashley is a CBS News political contributor. She previously served as communications director for Vice President Kamala Harris, and Emily previously served as the communications director for former Senator Rob Portman and as a spokesperson for Jeb Bush's 2016 presidential campaign. Welcome to both of you. So much to discuss. Let's start, though, with South Carolina, Emily, and what you make of the results there. Are there any conclusions that we can draw specifically from the fact that, once again, Donald Trump did very well with rural voters, less educated voters, but really struggled in the cities and with wealthier Republican voters?
Well, we're officially in the general election now. It's very clear that Donald Trump is going to be our nominee. And at the end of the day, Republican voters are going to come home on Election Day. They're going to see where the economy is. They're going to remember what things were like under the Trump administration. They have that nostalgia now, and they're going to come home on Election Day.
So you don't think that there is a cadre of Haley voters out there who are going to stay home if she is not the nominee?
There are also folks on the Democratic side that aren't enthusiastic. It's a bipartisan issue.
Yeah, no question that enthusiasm is a challenge, Ashley, for both sides. I want to ask you about this IVF fight that has suddenly emerged. I would imagine that Democrats welcome that debate because it is a reminder to their voters when it comes to reproductive rights that elections matter.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the battlefield that Democrats want to be playing on. They want Republicans to continue to become more and more extreme on this issue. Abortion is the issue, is the gift that keeps on giving for the Democratic Party. But I would love to take a step back here. I think what was interesting in the CBS poll, and you pointed this out at the beginning, is that there are a group, a sizable number of voters, specifically moderate voters and independent voters, that the Republican Party is bleeding consistently. We saw that in New Hampshire. We saw that this weekend in South Carolina. Those are the voters that are going to make the difference in the actual election. Now, one thing that I find very interesting is the map going forward favors Nikki Haley in a way that it doesn't Donald Trump. The first few states are much more conservative, much more red. As we move into these other Super Tuesday states, I think that's when we'll start to see the real vulnerability of Trump's real vulnerability that's facing Trump.
And yet, even in a state like Vermont, Emily, which votes on Super Tuesday, a state with lots of moderate Republicans, I think Trump is still leading her by 20 or 30 points. We just saw Americans for Prosperity, a big outside group funded by the Koch family, say we're pulling the plug, not because we don't believe in her, but we just don't see, how more money from us is going to help at this point.
Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee this cycle. And I think that focusing on any other options is just a fantasy at this point.
And listen, we want it to be Donald Trump. Trust me.
And
Donald Trump has to be on the ticket in order for President Biden to win. There has to be this threat around democracy for President Biden to win. But in addition to that, as I said before, race after race, poll after poll, Donald Trump continues to bleed these moderate and independent suburban voters. Remember, it only takes about 10% of those 30% that said they would not support, 30% of Nikki Haley voters that said they would not support Donald Trump to decide they're either going to stay home or either they're going to go with Joe Biden for us to win.
We're going to get this really interesting split screen moment on Thursday when bizarrely, both Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to be at the border. Immigration, obviously a huge issue. Why is Joe Biden planning to go to the border now, just the second time in his presidency?
Sure. I mean, I think it's very simple. He wants to box in the Republicans in the House. I mean, there was a bipartisan deal that was on the table. It was a conservatives' wish list. It was their dream bill, and they decided to walk against it and play politics. That's what the American public hates most about politics, is when our politicians decide to put their own political interests ahead of the interests of the nation. So he's going, I think, to start to sort of to box in Republicans and set the stage for a State of the Union address, where I think this is going to be a big subject. Because here's the House, the most probably feckless House in recent history. No action to protect the border, to close the border. No action to support our allies who are at war. No action to create jobs. I mean, it's every day they're writing the president's State of the Union address for him.
Did Republicans give the president a big opening on what should be one of his weakest issues?
I think that people trust that Donald Trump would be the one to solve the issues on the border. They remember that on day one,
they didn't pass like a bill like this when he was president.
And that wall fell apart, by the way.
On day one of the Biden administration, all he did was undo all of Trump's policies that were keeping our country secure and didn't replace them with anything else. What does that do? That is a huge magnet to bring folks up to the border and create the problem that we're in. It's the Biden policies that have put us in the situation that we're in, and polling keeps on showing that the American public blames Democrats and the Biden administration.
Can I just add something here?
Sure.
The Republican position on the border, their inaction to protect the border and close the border, is only going to become more untenable as we get closer and closer to the summers, because that's when the numbers start to increase. So they're going to be put under even more pressure to do something on this issue, and it's going to become clearer and clearer by the day that they refuse to do anything on it.
Is there more pressure now on
the Biden
Republicans
administration to use the tools that they already have to put in place to make our country more secure?
Right. We know that the president is considering doing something very similar to what Donald Trump did, invoking laws that would make it harder to apply for asylum. Does all of this put more pressure on House Republicans to give that bipartisan deal a second look?
The president needs to do what is in his own toolbox, use what's in his own toolbox.
But the reality is we know that the best way to address this issue is through comprehensive legislation passed by both chambers of the House and signed by the president.
Etienne, Emily Benavides, thank you both so much. We'll have to leave it there, but appreciate it so much.